There are 195 countries in the world, so let's start with the oldest, being Japan, which was established in the 4th century. Now before I get a horde of comments saying, well what about Egypt? Present-day Egypt, which is the Arab Republic of Egypt, was established and founded in the 1950s, and it's not the same as ancient Egypt with all the pharaohs and mummies. It may be located in the same area, but it's a totally different nation with a totally different culture. Going from the oldest to the newest, South Sudan is technically the youngest country, as it was founded in 2011 when it separated itself from Sudan. The smallest country by landmass is the Holy See, also commonly known as Vatican City, as it's only 0.2 square miles and has a population of only about 500 people, making it also the least populated country in the world. Now, India is the country with the most amount of people in it, but not by much. It only has China beat by about 3 million people. That's a 0.02% difference. China used to have a law that only allowed people to have one child, though just around the corner in Taiwan, they definitely don't need a one-child policy, as they have the lowest birth rate on the planet, that being 1.09 children per woman. For reference, in the US it's about 1.8, and in Niger, which is the country with the highest fertility rate, women give birth about 6.4 times in their lifetime. Even though Niger has the world's highest fertility rate, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're the fastest growing population, as that title belongs to Syria. On the other hand, the most declining population in 2023 was the Cook Islands. Its population decreased by 2.31% in the year of 2023 alone. The US is by far the richest country in the world, with a GDP of over $28 trillion. For reference, China is in second place with $18 trillion, and Germany is in third with $4.5 trillion. The country with the smallest GDP in the world is a small island of Tuvalu, with a GDP of $66 million. But that doesn't mean it's the least prosperous, as Tuvalu is a pretty small country, so it's hardly fair. The actual least prosperous country is Burundi, as it has the lowest GDP per capita, meaning in relation to how many people are actually living and working in the country. On the other hand, Monaco is technically the most prosperous with a GDP of about $240,000 per capita. While other countries measure their growth in GDP, Bhutan measures their growth by gross national happiness. Also, other countries make a lot of their decisions based on financial growth, when Bhutan always prioritizes the happiness of their citizens. But the happiest country in the world as of 2024 for the 7th consecutive year is Finland. Finland is known as the land of 1,000 lakes. Canada should be known as the land of 1,000,000 lakes, since they've got even more lakes than Finland. Canada's home to 62% of the world's lakes. Australia is the only country that's also a continent. It's also home to some of the most unique wildlife, such as kangaroos and koalas. While on the topic of wildlife, did you know that China is the only country where you can find wild panda bears? If you are a true wildlife lover, you would love visiting Brazil, with a biodiversity index rank of 0.772. Just for perspective, Indonesia is second with a rating of 0.614. Moving on to a completely different part of the world, we have Madagascar. It's home to over 90% of the world's lemur population, including numerous species living only on the island. And you think that's impressive? In Romania, there's over 6,000 bears living in the Carpathian Mountains. Romania is also known for having the world's heaviest building, the Palace of the Parliament. Speaking of buildings, in Dubai, one of the cities in the United Arab Emirates, there's a skyscraper called Burj Khalifa that's been proclaimed the world's tallest building, with it having 163 floors. Then we have Nepal, with the tallest mountain in the world being Mount Everest. On a side note, Nepal is also the only country with a non-rectangular flag, because they're just that cool. Maldives, on the other hand, is the lowest country in the world, with an average ground elevation level of only 1.5 meters above sea level. What's also worth mentioning is the fact that less than a fifth of its 1,200 islands are uninhabited. Another less densely populated country in the world is Mongolia. There are almost as many people as horses. Singapore is quite the opposite. It's one of the most densely populated countries in the world, and is also known for its efficient public transport system. Now back to Southern Europe, Malta is home to 10 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, such as Coastal Cliffs or Aura. It has some of the oldest known human structures in the world, dating back over 5,000 years, known as the megalithic temples. Speaking of European countries, Russia spans 11 time zones and is the largest country in the world by landmass. It's also only 2.5 miles apart from the US at their closest point. Russia shares its borders with another interesting country, Poland. It's the origin country of one of the most popular alcoholic drinks out there, vodka. It's also a place where Europe's last primeval forest, Białowieża Forest, is located. While we're on the topic of landscapes and forests, Switzerland is home to the Matterhorn, one of the most iconic mountains in the Alps, which is also featured on the packaging of Toblerone chocolates. Near Switzerland is a small landlocked landlocked country called Liechtenstein. Despite its small size, Liechtenstein is one of the wealthiest nations in the world, with a strong focus on financial services. On a completely different note, Iceland, one of the oldest democracies in the world, is also one of the safest countries in the world. On the contrary, Venezuela is the least safe country in the world, with a crime index of approximately 83.76. Besides the high crime rate, Venezuela also has the world's tallest waterfall called Angel Falls, that's almost 1,000 meters tall. In the Indian Ocean, there's Sri Lanka, where the world's oldest human-planted tree is located. This sacred fig tree in Anuradhapura is over 2,300 years old. Sri Lanka was also colonized 3 times before gaining independence in 1948. Another country, Turkey, is one of the few countries in the world located between 2 continents, Asia and Europe. It is also a place where the story of Santa Claus originated. Speaking of Asia, North Korea is located on the eastern part of the continent. It operates on its own unique calendar known as the Juche calendar, which starts from the birth year of the country's founder, Kim Il-sung. It's also one of the most isolated countries in the world, with very limited access to the internet. Also, the girls in North Korea are limited to just 18 approved hairstyles, while the boys have a choice of 10, and none of them is a buzz cut. Another Asian country, Thailand, is known as the Land of Smiles due to the friendly and welcoming nature of its people. It's the only Southeast Asian country that was never colonized by a European power. Next up, Uganda. It's home to half of the world's remaining mountain gorillas, which can be found in the Burundi Impenetrable Forest and the Maginga Gorilla National Park. Uganda is also a super landlocked country with no coastline, yet 26% of its land is covered by rivers and lakes. As for lakes, the world's biggest lake is called the Caspian Sea. It shares its coastline with many countries, one of them being Turkmenistan, a country that is 70% desert. It's also one of the least visited countries in the world. On the other hand, France is one of the most visited countries in the world because of numerous iconic monuments such as the Louvre Museum or the Eiffel Tower, which by the way grows taller during the summer due to a natural physical phenomenon called thermal expansion. Also, did you know that the Statue of Liberty was built in France before being disassembled and shipped to New York in 1885? Over 1,000 kilometers away from Paris lies Spain, home to the 3rd largest number of UNESCO World Heritage Sites, including the Alhambra and Sagrada Familia. It's also the only country where morning lasts until 2 p.m. Another country with many UNESCO World Heritage Sites is Italy. Italy is the 5th most visited country in the world. It's most known for 2 things, pasta and pizza. Italians have been eating pasta since the 4th century BC. Additionally, all 3 of Europe's active volcanoes are located there. However, when it comes to volcanoes, Italy stands no chance against Mexico. Mexico as a whole is home to around 126 volcanoes, with 27 of them being considered active. It is also the biggest consumer of Coca-Cola in the world. Speaking of countries in which citizens love a very specific beverage, we can't forget to mention the United Kingdom. Brits drink about 100 million cups of tea every day. It's also a country where stamps originated from. Let's jump back to Eastern Europe now. Ukraine is home to 7 World Heritage Sites and has the 2nd largest desert in Europe. It is also known for its hospitality. It also has a coastline which spans over 2,800 kilometers, but it's nothing compared to Greece's coastline that's about 16,000 kilometers long. 80% of Greece is made up of mountains. It is also a place where the first Olympics were held in the summer of 776 BC. Speaking of sports, Norway is the sportiest country, with a sports participation rate at around 79%. It also has the highest number of sports medals. On the other hand, there are countries that should definitely be sportier, such as Nauru, with an obesity rate of 88.5%. It is also a country with no official capital city. South Africa is quite the opposite. It has multiple capitals, one for each branch of the government in the country. It is also the only country in the world to have hosted soccer, cricket, and rugby World Cups. Now that we've mentioned rugby, did you know that the 3rd best rugby player in the world is from New Zealand? New Zealand is home to the only species of flightless parrot in the world, the kakapo. It is also a country with more sheep than there are people. Pakistan, on the contrary, is the 5th most populated country with a population of 241 million people. It is also home to the world's 2nd highest mountain peak, K2, which is considered one of the most challenging peaks to climb. One of the easiest peaks to climb, however, is located in Tanzania. It is the largest country in East Africa and about 4 times the size of the UK. Now let's talk about Papua New Guinea. It is one of the most linguistically diverse countries in the world, with over 850 indigenous languages spoken. It is also infamously known for sorcery-related violence. Witches, being mostly women, may be accused of almost anything, from natural deaths to the loss of land. Another country where sorcery is still practiced is Chile. This country, besides having the world's largest swimming pool, is also known for being the 2nd longest country in the world. This one's gonna be a bit more disturbing. Bulgaria has the highest mortality rate in the world, at 15.4 deaths per 1,000 people. Also, Bulgarians nod for no and shake their heads for yes. Another country with gestures that mean completely different things than in the rest of the world is Hungary. Hungarians also nod for no and shake their heads side to side for yes. It is also one of the oldest countries in Europe, and their alphabet consists of 44 letters. It is almost twice as long as the English alphabet that only consists of 26 letters. When it comes to letters and languages, the Netherlands is a country with one of the easiest languages to learn, that being Dutch. Dutch is also the national language of the Dutch Antilles. It's 5 islands in the Caribbean. Speaking of Caribbean countries, the biggest of them is Cuba. It has one of the world's highest literacy rates, and is home to the smallest bird in the world. On the other hand, Burkina Faso is one of the countries with the lowest literacy rates in the world, being around 35 to 37%. Burkina Faso is also home to 36 different ethnic groups, each with their own variety of folk music. Additionally, the country's name translates as the land of honest men. Now obviously, I haven't spoken about every country in the world, so if I've missed yours, leave an interesting fact about your country in the comments, and I might make a part 2. Anyways, that wraps up today's video. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing, and if you want something else to watch, you can check out one of my other videos.